Good morning.
Good morning, Linda.
Our theme this month is compassion. I care for others. Ernest Holmes wrote, "Compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the outpouring of the divine givingness through all. When the members of a community love one another, that community is solid, prosperous, and happy. Love alone can solve the world's problems and bring about the day of universal peace. You and I have certain people upon whom we lavish a great deal of affection. This is both natural and desirable. But would we like these few any less if we increased our love to include all humanity? Suppose we make a daily habit of feeling that we like people and they like us. We belong to them and they belong to us. In a very real sense, everyone we meet is part of our own family to love and to enjoy. Let's then meditate daily on this thought. My purpose is that a feeling of goodwill shall pass from me to others. Today I embrace the world in this affection and desire, so that good shall come to everyone." So let's look at the screen and say the affirmation of May with me for purpose and with purpose. With me and with purpose. I am rich in spirit, prosperous in all ways, and open to receiving and compassionately sharing my good. I care for others. Yes.
Gorgeous. Thank you so much. You did that so well. So we receive instruction from all the sacred texts on this thing called compassion, on caring for others. And I want to share one of the more well-known ones, maybe to some of you. And I'm going to share the Lamsa version of it, which is the translation from the original Aramaic text. And it's in Deuteronomy. It's chapter 15 and verse 11. And it's an instruction. And remember, all of these were instructions from the divine, which we know is centered within us. We were told by Jesus the kingdom of heaven is within. So if we can just imagine this as instruction from within us, as the voice of the divine itself that says, open your hand wide to your poor brother and sister and to the needy in your land. Open your hand wide to your poor brother and sister and to the needy in your land. And that reminds me of a story that many of you may have heard before, and this is one of my favorite stories. It's a story of a man who stepped onto a beach, and then off in the horizon or off in the distance, he saw someone going from the shore to the edge of the water and tossing something and back and forth and back and forth. So he approached the man, and he was struck by the thousands of starfish that were all over the beach, thousands of them that apparently had come in with the tide and were there stranded. And so as he was watching this person throwing them one by one into the ocean to care for them, a way of showing his compassion and care, right? He was struck by the futility of it. At least it seemed to him it was futile. Why, waste all that energy? There's no way that all of them could be reached. And so he walked up to the man and he said to him, that one is not going to make, you're not really making all that much difference. There are thousands of them here. Why waste your time? And so the person stooped, picked up a starfish, threw it in the ocean, and said, I made a difference for that one. So it's a reminder to us that each and every encounter that we have with others is an opportunity to care for them, to show our compassion and our love, to be love in action. This year is a year of spirituality in action, not just talking about it, but actually being it and practicing it. And so caring for others is the practice. Compassion is the principle that we feel of love active in us and having empathy for others. And so this entire month then is dedicated to this beautiful principle of compassion and the action of caring. Our source book for this month is a book that I read some time ago, and I've read it multiple times, and it is really worth going back to over and over again because it reminds us of the principles that underlie true compassion and true compassionate action, the spiritual principles. It's written by a man by the name of Reverend Dr. Gary Simmons. He's a Unity minister. And his book is called Eye of the Storm. And notice it's not I, like an eye of the storm, it's a capital I of the storm. And it's all about embracing conflict and creating peace. Because until we can learn to be centered in our divine self, in the most dire of circumstances, it's very difficult for us to be a compassionate presence that really cares. So this is inner work that we are doing this month to prepare ourselves for the most challenging circumstances we may encounter, whether it's a conflict with another person or whether it's walking into a really challenging situation in order to help someone else. The more that we can learn to be grounded in who we are in truth, the more capable and able will be to be a beneficial presence. So the topic that I chose for today is compassion. For this purpose I was born. And the reason why I chose that particular idea was that we'll give Jenny a little chance to, because we have somebody upstairs, one of the children upstairs. Thank you. Beautiful. The reason why I chose for this purpose I was born to describe compassion came from an awareness that I gained in studying the Lamsa Bible version and all of the translations that came from the original Aramaic that were sometimes quite different from what was in the King James Version. Realizing that the original language that was spoken by Jesus and the disciples was Aramaic. And the translations over the years have gotten, in some places, distorted. So here's a really great example. The King James Version quotes Jesus as saying when he's on the cross, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" But the Lamsa that comes from the original Aramaic says, listen to this, "It is for this purpose that I was born." Whoa, really different from "Why hast thou forsaken me?" to "It is for this purpose that I was born." Whoosh. That gives me God bumps because it changes the whole feel of that experience. Jesus, instead, standing fully grounded and rooted in his God consciousness, realizing that there is a purpose even in this most challenging experience. For this purpose, I was born. Wow. So just as Jesus was born for a particular purpose, demonstrating Christ consciousness, oneness consciousness, demonstrating what compassion truly looks like even in the most dire of circumstances, we too are born for a purpose. We all are here on purpose. We are all here, and the common purpose that we all share is to be vehicles of love, vehicles of compassion. And if we remember that, We don't have to worry about all the details of whether I'm in the right profession or whether I'm in, whatever it is. If we remember that wherever we are, that we are here to be vehicles or instruments of love, compassion, and caring. So let's breathe that in. So one of the quotes that the Gary Simmons book that I really love is this: "We walk the compassionate path of the spiritual warrior, calmly and peacefully, while looking into the mouth of the dragon. And remember, in the midst of all of that, who we are, which is divine emissaries, and to think and feel and act accordingly." There's a call for action. To think, to feel, and act accordingly, to be that divine emissary of compassion. So, what are some of the principles then behind being an emissary of compassion? The first one, which is really powerful, is that life is for you. Life is for me, life is for you. And there's a story that, let me give you a quote by Ernest Holmes first that asks the question, how would your life be different if you lived as if nothing and no one was against you? How would you live if you knew for sure that nothing and no one was against you? That life was for you, that everyone, no matter how challenging they seem to be, that there was a gift for you in all of it. Wow. That's the shift into the Christ consciousness or oneness conscious, into our true nature. Life is for us. So Gary Simmons tells the story at the very beginning of his book about how he met two Jaidish Hindu astrologers. And they had offered him a free consultation at some conference that they had attended. And after an amazing reading on his past, they had asked him to put down 4 things that were positive about your life experience and 4 not so positive things. And Gary wrote them down in secret, and then they went about to tell him almost every little detail that had happened to him up until this point. And he was blown away by the accuracy of it. And then the pattern that began to reveal itself to him through talking with them, because they're also very rooted and grounded in spiritual principle, and they tell you that your future is full of infinite possibilities. What makes the past like the future is that we carry our patterns forward with us, unless we change those patterns, and then we open ourselves to a whole different future. So Gary's many failed marriages was very much a part of this reading. And the pattern that he realized was revealed is that he was placing the burden of his well-being on others. And in this case, his previous wives. He was giving them the burden of his well-being instead of making that his own thing. And so when they weren't fulfilling whatever he wanted them to be doing to promote his well-being, everything began to fall apart. So Muru, one of the astrologers, said to him, "Can you see how all your experiences of things being against you has its root in your beliefs?" And he finally could see that. And so he went away from that particular experiencing, realizing something that we talk about all the time here, is that every time we seek outside ourselves for whatever it is that we need, if we expect others to be that for us or whatever, whenever we are thinking that we can only be safe or feel okay when we gain others' cooperation, approval, acceptance, and so on, we are giving our power, the power for our well-being, to someone else. And believe me, they probably don't want it. They'd rather just take care of themselves. So it doesn't mean that we don't have compassion for one another, but it means that in order to be a beneficial presence, an emissary of compassion, it's important that we get this principle that life is for us and life is for everyone else. And here's the thing, is every time that we resist what seems to oppose us, we put up resistance, see it as an attack, we reaffirm the belief that something out there is opposing us, or that someone out there is supposed to make us feel better. And it replays over and over and over again in our lives, like Gary's failed marriages. So it's, there's so much out there now about virtual reality, right? Where you put on the glasses and you're in this whole virtual reality. In truth, we are all living a virtual reality. Have you ever thought about that? We are projecting our own set of beliefs onto the screen of life. And we're coming up with our own interpretations of what things mean, our own stories, and as a result, we have our own unique experience. And that can be seen often if you have a conversation with someone about an event that happened and you realize they saw it very differently than you did based on your beliefs. So here's the cool thing, is we can change our beliefs. We don't have to continue to allow them to shape our lives in a way that doesn't serve us. So let us make our lives be about proving that life is for us, that the universe is for us. So repeat after me, just to help ground this in. The universe and everyone in it is for me.
The universe and everyone in it is for me.
Wonderful. Okay, the principle of wholeness is another principle that really must be embraced in order for us to be emissaries of compassion. We say this often here, I am whole, perfect, and complete. But do we really believe it? Do we really believe it? The wholeness that we are is inherent. It's not something that we can add to or that anybody can take away from. Our wholeness is the gift that we're given by being who we are. Pure spirit having a human incarnation. And it's that wholeness that we carry with us even beyond the body. Ernest Holmes says there is that within every individual that partakes of the nature of universal wholeness. So the center of our wholeness then can be found in what Gary Simmons calls the eye of the storm. And he uses the analogy of, think of a hurricane, right? And in a hurricane, no matter how powerful the winds are that go around the exterior, right in the center, and see, I lived in South Florida, so I know what it's like to have it be crazy and wild, and then all of a sudden this incredible calm when the eye goes over. The calmness and the stillness is such a contrast that it kind of blows your mind. So there's that calm in the center of the storm. That's what we are to step into to be the beneficial presence that we choose to be the emissaries, to move out of the swirl of conflict and the things that look like they're all dissonant and out of sorts in life, and to stand in that calm center. Because think about it, when we are calm, when we are relaxed, then we are open to the inflow of divine wisdom. We are open to insight. We are able to see more clearly what's really going on. We're able to see the invisible causes that are going on, possibly behind a particular situation. We're able to observe our own inner world and make changes. So being in that calm center is essential for this walk of being an emissary of compassion. It reminds me of I recently saw a broadcast of Brene Brown, and I love her work. She's a researcher in the field of vulnerability and compassion and shame, actually. And she herself was a doubter, a great doubter on the importance of vulnerability. She thought, forget it, I'm not going to show anybody what's going on inside me. But then she began to discover with her research that people who allowed themselves to be vulnerable were more able to make deep connections with other people, able to have happier, healthier relationships. So she tells a story that illustrates this so beautifully. She said that she and her husband went on vacation back to the lake of their childhood. And Leslie's shaking her head. She's heard that. Yeah, back to the lake of her childhood, and it was been the first time in years, and actually a really long time since she'd gotten into her bathing suit even, and she realized she wasn't as slim as she used to be, and a little self-conscious, but she decided to go for it, and she and her husband went early in the morning out for a swim in the lake. And as a reminder of old times when they used to do this when they were teenagers. So they're out there swimming, and actually he's quite a bit ahead of her. And she was just feeling the joy and the delight of being in this deep water and swimming, and feeling her ability to swim to come back. And so she called out to him, and he gave her a very curt, "I'm okay," kind of message. And she was hurt. And then she began to observe the story going on in her mind, which is, oh my gosh, he doesn't find me attractive anymore. He's trying to take off and get rid of me. And this whole entire story just started. She was caught in the swirl of the story initially. And then when they finally got on shore, she said, the story I am telling myself is, she was vulnerable. She opened herself up. She shared the story that she'd been telling herself. And he was like, that is not where my mind was at all. And then he said, the story I told myself was, and of course his whole focus was on how he could be strong enough to swim to get his grandchildren over to this island, which was always kind of a fun thing to go to the island, with the possibility of all these speedboats going by and everything. This would be later in the day, and worried about how he was going to possibly do this. And so his "I'm okay" was really a response to him being caught up in the story. Once they shared their stories, once they were vulnerable, once they were able to drop the stories and come back and return to love and return to compassion for each other and for themselves. So this is such a great example to me of what it takes. Sometimes the way we get back into our core and center is with techniques like this. The story I am telling myself is. How often have we told ourselves a story about something that turned out to be so far off from what was really going on? And so this is an opportunity to take care of that right up front. Not let it simmer and seethe inside of us, but in other words, to bring ourselves back to center by allowing ourselves to be vulnerable about the stories we're telling ourselves. That's the principle of wholeness. The principle of abundance. Life is abundant. Life is abundant. We are the presence of abundance. And yet, how often do we buy into the consciousness of scarcity? And here's some examples. Have you become hardened to life and to others, resistant to change, defensive, insecure, argumentative, or skillful at avoiding conflict? These are all examples of how we buy into scarcity. We don't realize the abundance of life. Or do you worry about paying bills or about the security of your future, wondering how it's going to happen? Do you tell yourself that there's not enough time, energy, money, or volunteers? Do you tell yourself that you are lacking, that you're not good enough, smart enough, whatever the scenario might be? All of that is based on a belief in scarcity, while all the while life is abundant. And here's what happens when we buy into lack: we are driven, or we either give up or we're driven. It can drive us to compensate for that perceived lack, which means that it's hard on our bodies, it's hard on our mentality, it's hard on our emotions, and it's hard on our relationships. Ernest Holmes talks about abundance in this way. He said, a sense of separation from good, which is another term for God's abundance, God's infinite abundance. So a sense of separation from good causes us to feel restricted, while a sense of unity with good changes the currents of causation and brings happier conditions into the experience. He says, if we lack, if we are poor, if we are without friends, if we are without opportunity, we should be sure to erase from our consciousness any sense of lack. So, think of an affirmation for that for yourself. I am the presence of abundance. Abundance is within me and all around me. And so again, as we learn to stand in the principle of abundance, we are more able to be that emissary of compassion. Faith. Faith. Ernest Holmes says, fear is the great enemy of humanity. But fear is a mental attitude, and as such can be converted into something else. Fear is the reverse mental attitude to faith. So it's shifting fear into faith. So others are not our enemies. If there's any enemy, and actually there is no enemy, but if there is any, it's fear. It's the fear that is within us. So how do we strengthen this thing called faith? We're told that we're given a full measure of faith. It's not that we lack faith, it's where we are placing our faith. Are we placing it in the things that we fear? Are we placing it in a knowing that life is abundant, that life is for us, that we are whole, perfect, and complete? So how do we build this faith? How do we redirect it in the right direction? The first thing we do is we realize the mirror effect, the mirror principle, let's call it, the mirror principle. When we feel threatened or intimidated, if we use it as a mirror to look for the false belief, the story that we're telling ourselves, then we can shift our attention back into the observer self, the God self, the place of compassion and wholeness. So the mirror, using life as a mirror to give us information on where we might be off our center. And then we can choose compassion in our daily relationships. A really good example is letting go of needing to be right. There's a phrase in the Course in Miracles that I love that says, would you rather be right or happy? So as we focus our attention on demonstrating wholeness and worth by choosing love and compassion, we can then say with great clarity, your way is right for you, and my way is right for me. And it reminds me of that beautiful sermon last week by Reverend Armand, where he said that it's time for us to learn to be comfortable with each other's differences. And he used, our political perspectives as an example. It's important for us to learn to realize that what's right for you is right for you, and that's fine. And my way is right for me. Learn to live together and to work together from that perspective. So it's not about winning. It's not about defeating the enemy or looking good. It's about being a beneficial presence and finding a way forward toward our common good. And the last one is pray. This another way to strengthen our faith is pray. Something that we do here so well. And it's a way to practice forgiveness by simply shifting our attention from being the victim into being a vehicle of love, using prayer to bring us back to that wholeness, that divinity that is within us and within everyone, realizing we are uncovering that divinity in each other. So let us end with a prayer. Invite everybody to just turn within, knowing that here now in this beautiful, perfect moment, that the fullness of God, the infinite, the almighty, resides. That right here where we are is that whole perfect, complete presence of spirit. And we are of that. We are an expression of that. We are the essence of the divine wholeness itself. I know that as such, we also partake of the abundance of the infinite, invisible source of all. That we are abundance in person. And I'm also aware that in this moment, we are the presence of love, the presence of compassion, and that we are motivated in all ways to be those emissaries of compassion for each other, knowing that each and every encounter with another is another opportunity to show compassion, to show love, to show understanding. And knowing that as each of us more fully ground and root ourselves in the spirit essence of who we are, whole, perfect, and complete, knowing life is for us and for everyone, knowing that life is abundant and the abundance of God resides right here, knowing that as we are rooted and grounded in that presence, that the flow of divine wisdom and solution and calmness and clarity is ours. Knowing all of this to be true, I know that each and every one of us, more fully and completely, are able to walk the path of the compassionate warrior. And for this, I give my thanks. I am so grateful for the shift in consciousness, for this awareness of truth, and for this wonderful knowing that our lives do make a difference in each and every moment. And I release this word into the universal law of mind, and I embrace the goodness of life. And so it is.
So
Amen.
it is.